right, this Friday night, lights will stay on in California for the football games, but the game days may be numbered for the state's youngest gridiron stars. A group of lawmakers in California are trying to ban tackle football for kids under 12. They'll have to engineer a late drive to get this bill over the goal because the clock is ticking. It still has to clear the state assembly and by the end of the month, and then the Senate before it would then head over to Governor Gavin Newsom's desk. So it's got a ways to go. But those rooting for the bill stress that they need to protect kids, saying their younger brains are at a higher risk for traumatic brain injury, CTE, all sorts of bad stuff. If successful, California's proposed ban on kids tackle football would be the first in the country. Joining me now to talk about all this is Chris Nowinski. He's a neuroscientist who played football at Harvard and wrestled in the WWE. He is now CEO of the Concussion Legacy Foundation. Chris, it's good to have you back on the show. Is this ban on tackle football for kids under 12 a good idea or a bad one?
I think it's a great idea. We now know that CT is a huge problem in football, and we can all be okay with NFL players taking that risk for millions of dollars with informed consent and understanding of what they're doing. But to look at it and say, should we do the same thing with 5- and 6-year-olds, risking CTE for nothing when they don't understand it? No, I think we need an age minimum for tackle football, like we have an age minimum for heading in soccer, which is now banned till age 11.
Yeah, we had you on the show a couple months ago to talk about the fact that 41% of high school and college football players' brains were already showing signs of CTE postmortem. Do we know if CTE and traumatic brain injuries are showing up in kids under 12?
Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, most kids that young aren't dying, so we can't study their brains.
Right, we only know after there's been a death.
But what scared me is that we recently publicized that Wyatt Bramwell, who played from age 8 to 18 before he took his life, had stage 2 CTE, which is as bad as Junior Seau had after 20 years in the NFL. To get to stage 2, it probably takes at least 10 years to get there. So it means he probably got it as a kid. And there's no reason for us to think that kids can't get CTE when they're 5, 6, 7 years old if you hit them in the head enough times, because their developing brain is much less protected against something like CTE. And they hit, shockingly, just as hard as college football players because they have these huge heads and heavy helmets that create huge hits on their brain.
So talk about the fact that parents are saying, there's some people already pushing back on this, saying, you know what, it's a parent's right to decide what's best for my kid. I don't need the California lawmakers telling me my kid can't play this sport.
Even for me, it's hard to imagine the government telling you what sport to play. But then again, if we knew that parents were giving their child CTE, we would step in and say no. These kids, the median youth football player in a CDC study took 378 blows to the head each year. If a parent hit their own child in the head 378 times, they'd go to jail. If we let kids hit each other in the head and they get CTE, we can't just throw up our hands and say, whoops, it was worth it, when flag is a perfectly sensible alternative for those kids with average of 8 head impacts, no CTE, but they learn all those life lessons that they need to get through something like team sports, which I fully support.
Do you think part of the problem might be that initially when, some of the professional football players and their families started coming forward and saying there's a problem here, these are terrible, terrible injuries. My husband, father, fill in the blank, son, he completely changed. He committed suicide. We did an autopsy and found that his brain had all this terrible disease. Is part of the problem that the NFL and many college football teams took too long to address this?
What's playing out here is that the problem is the NFL and the NCAA spent so much time distributing misinformation. The NFL is well known for playing the role of big tobacco for the first 15 years of this, saying that this wasn't a problem, it was false. And so I'm seeing those arguments that they used to claim 10 years ago and they no longer claim, playing out when parents are trying to justify letting their kids play. CT is not real. Other sports have the same problem. It's not true. And so there's a lot of misinformation overcome. Just to frame it one other way, just remember that these same parents aren't putting their kids in the weight room. No one puts their kid in the weight room before like 12 years old because we're worried about their joint development and trauma to their joints. Your joints are not as important as your brain. So if you're not going to put your kid in the weight room, how the heck do you let them get hit in the head due to sport where more than 700 of the first 1,000 players studied? We're up to 700 football players with CT now. We've only looked at 1,000. I'm very concerned how big this is going to turn out to be when we can diagnose it in living people.
Chris Nowinski, good to have you here. Thanks again for coming on and talking about this important issue. Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.